All the Young Dudes, James's Perspective by Stay in Dreams. Chapter 14. First Year, The Prank. Sunday, the 2nd, January 1972. James made up his mind pretty quickly after the ministry incident. He wasn't going to tell Sirius about his run-in with Mr. Black. Even though a part of him felt a bit guilty for keeping it secret, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Sirius already had enough reasons to despise his last name. If James could spare him even the tiniest flicker of pain, he'd do it in a heartbeat. "Brilliant!" James exclaimed, slamming his hand down on the bathroom counter with a loud thud. "Completely brilliant!" "You're so clever!" Peter chimed in, his round face beaming with admiration. The four of them were crammed into the tiny bathroom they all shared. Sirius, fully dressed and holding an umbrella, stood in the bathtub. Above him, a small dark storm cloud hovered ominously, pouring rain down onto him. Remus, wand in hand, directed the cloud's movements, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sirius shuffled back and forth in the tub, but the cloud followed him faithfully, drenching him with each step. James and Peter had only just returned to Hogwarts a few hours ago, but no sooner had they finished dinner than Sirius and Remus had dragged them upstairs to reveal the fruits of their latest scheme. And, as James had suspected, the two evil geniuses had come up with a perfectly wicked idea to get back at Snape. "Lupin gave me the idea," Sirius said, grinning with a mix of pride and mischief, "but I found the charm to actually do it. Snivellus won't know what's hit him." "When can we do it?" James was practically bouncing on his toes now, unable to contain his excitement. "First thing tomorrow? Breakfast? Potions?" "Dinner," Sirius shook his head, a calculating look in his eye. "Bigger audience." "Yes, dinner," James agreed immediately, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He turned to Sirius and Remus, his face lit up with admiration. "Honestly, you two, I'm so bloody proud." "Cheers," Sirius replied, raising an eyebrow in mock irony. Then he glanced at Remus, who was still holding the cloud in place. Lupin, you can probably stop now. My feet are getting wet." "Oh!" Remus snapped out of his focus and flicked his wand, dispelling the cloud. He glanced down at the tub, realizing he'd overdone it. The old plug hole was struggling to drain all the water, and Sirius was left ankle-deep in cold water. "Sorry about that." "It's fine," Sirius laughed, stepping out of the bath and wringing out his soaked robes. "Just make sure you do the same to Snivellus." "So, Lupin's doing this one?" James asked, already picturing Snape's greasy hair plastered to his head, dripping wet in the middle of the great hall. "He's better at it," Sirius said with a casual shrug. "But I can do it too, if we get any interference." Monday, the 3rd January 1972. Having new mates around made life a lot easier for James. No longer did he have to be the idea blank all the time. He still had that natural leader instinct, of course, but he was getting better at letting others take the spotlight now and then, especially when their ideas were better than his own. He'd come to realize that not being the center of attention all the time didn't mean people would stop noticing him. His competitive streak was still very much intact, though. He absolutely loved the challenge of going head-to-head with Sirius. Whether he won or lost, he always wrapped it up, with a broad grin and hearty slap on the back. Remus, on the other hand, was quickly becoming the best in most of their classes, but he didn't have the same drive for competition. James didn't mind, though. He was perfectly content watching Remus excel at everything magical, almost in awe of it. The first lesson after Christmas was a bit of an odd one. James, Sirius, and Peter were all jittery with nervous energy, buzzing with anticipation for the prank they had lined up. Remus looked excited too, but to James's surprise, his eager expression was directed at the book in front of him. James had never seen Remus so thrilled to open a book. Had he suddenly developed a love for reading overnight? Maybe Sirius had corrupted him with all those endless hours in the library during the break, which apparently both had spent at Hogwarts. James had tried hard to mask the jealousy in his smile when they told him. The day dragged on painfully, every minute crawling by like molasses as James half listened to the professor's drone on. Sirius and Peter were fidgeting too, mirroring his restlessness, but Remus seemed completely absorbed by the lessons. James couldn't help but watch, confused, as Remus kept consulting their text with a look of sheer wonder. His newfound focus on reading was definitely paying off. Remus was the first student to get his brick to bounce in charms, mastering the spell after just a quick glance at his book. James found himself grinning when he saw the scowl of Lily's face. She was usually the top student in charms, but Remus was giving her a run for her money. It was in the afternoon, during potions, that things started to go pear-shaped. It began with Slughorn handing back their essays on the 12 uses of dragon's blood. The Marauders did fairly well. Even Remus, who hadn't even started his essay before James left for the Christmas break. As usual, Snape got the highest mark and earned 5 points for Slytherin. Lily came in second and snagged a point for Gryffindor, only beating Sirius by a few marks. James was eager to tease Sirius about it at every opportunity. Snape shot Lily an oily smile, and she grinned back, cheeks tinged pink. James felt a surge of irritation. Bloody hell, could she stop looking at him like that? Snape wasn't even remotely good-looking. James wanted to hurl every time he saw that great big nose of his. Wonder if it's worth cozying up to Snivellus just for one measly house point, Sirius grumbled loud enough for both Lily and Snape to hear. Lily spun around, her cheeks now sporting 2 bright pink patches. Shut up, Black, she hissed. No one likes a sore loser. Sirius shot back immediately. Hardly losing when your boyfriend lets you copy his work. James froze for a second. Snape? Her boyfriend? But then he remembered the flowers Snape had given her and felt a wave of nausea. I do not copy him, and Severus is not my boyfriend. Lily's face was getting redder. James felt a bit of relief at that. At least the girl had some taste. You're blushing, Evans, Sirius smirked, nudging James. Isn't that sweet? James snickered, nodding along. He was always going to back Sirius, no matter what. Ignore them, Lily, James whispered, not bothering to turn his head. They're just jealous. Jealous of what, Snivellus? James said quickly, already feeling his blood start to boil. Snape had a way of getting under his skin faster than anyone else. Jealousy of a slimy, greasy git like you? Keep dreaming. Sirius laughed, clearly pleased that James had jumped in. Peter laughed too, more to be part of the gang than anything else. Slughorn, blissfully unaware, had his back to the class, scribbling instructions on the blackboard. Even Remus seemed to be ignoring them, more interested in flipping through his book. At James's provocation, Snape finally turned around, sneering at Sirius. I hear you had a very quiet Christmas, Black, he said, his voice low and laced with venom. Your family couldn't stand to have you around for more than a few days before packing you off back to school. Is that right? His lips curled cruelly. All the pure-blood families are talking about it. The Black's black sheep. James's heart pounded in his chest. Oh, hell no. How dare that greasy git Snape could hurl insults at James all day long. He didn't care. But going after his friends, that was a whole different story. Nothing made James's blood boil more, especially when he saw the frozen look on Sirius's face. Sirius's fist clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Shut your face. Okay, so Sirius wasn't in the right state for his usual sharp comebacks, but James was quick to back him up. Yeah, watch it, Snape, James was schooling now. You'd better be careful what you say. Never know what might happen. Is that a threat, Potter? Snape drawled, sounding bored. Forgive me if I'm not quaking in my boots. Going to set Loony Loopy on me again?" James's eyes darted to Remus, who flinched at the nickname. James had only ever heard Snape use it, and he was thankful for that. But Remus already had enough to deal with, what with everyone casting glances at his scars and whispering about his Muggle mother. If they weren't in class, James didn't know what he'd do to Snape for being such a cruel git to the two of his best mates. Remus's hand went straight to his wand, all his focus now on Snape, who smirked and said, "Oh my, have you actually learned some magic, Lupin? I'm impressed. Mind you, I've heard they can train some monkeys to perform basic tricks, so I suppose it's no real achievement." Remus raised his wand, ready to cast something. He could be even more impulsive than Sirius sometimes. James shot him a warning look, while Sirius grabbed Remus's wrist and pushed it back down onto the desk. "Not yet," Sirius muttered. Remus clenched his jaw, staring hard at the blackboard, his wand still gripped tightly in his fist. James was seething too, but he tried to ignore Snape, was chuckling as he turned back around. Lily whispered to Snape, "There's no need to be so horrid to him." For the rest of the lesson, James could think of nothing but their revenge. His anger was laser-focused on Snape now, not just because of the hair prank, but because of how he treated Remus. And Lily, why did she keep hanging around Snape? Couldn't she see how cruel he was? James wanted to humiliate Severus and make Lily see that she should stop being friends with him. By the time dinner rolled around, Remus was white with rage. He barely touched his food, which was a sure sign he was really angry. Remus was always hungry. He glared at Snape from across the hall, and Snape noticed, nudging the Slytherins around him and pointing at the marauders laughing. James thought he could make out the words Loony Lupin. Both he and Sirius scolded back. Lily noticed too, and turned to them. "You lot, just leave Seth alone, okay? This stupid fight is going to go on forever if none of you can be mature enough to give it a rest, Evans." James rolled his eyes, his annoyance with Snape slipping over onto her. "Bad enough you have to be friends with the tosser. Now you're trying to defend him? Where's your house loyalty, eh?" "This has nothing to do with houses," she insisted, indignant. "It's a ridiculous spat over nothing. He insulted Remus. You all pick on him all the time. He started it. Oh yeah, so you have to finish it. Right, Potter?" She jumped up from her seat, grabbing her bag. "God, you're so full of yourselves." She stormed off, plonking herself down further along the table. "Loves a fight, that one," James grinned, while fighting with Severus made him want to push the black-haired boy into a hole and hope it swallowed him. Fighting with Evans was exhilarating. She was smart, quick with her comebacks, and he loved the feeling of having all her attention on him. It was the one time she looked at him more than Snape. Back at the Slytherin table, there was a yelp of laughter. Remus snapped, apparently deciding he'd had enough. He stood up, wand in hand, even though he was supposed to wait for Sirius' signal. "Legada Pulaviem." The spell worked instantly. A rain cloud shot from the end of Remus's wand so fast that James barely caught a glimpse of it before it settled over Snape's greasy head, grey and swollen, like it was about to burst. And burst it did, unleashing a downpour so fierce that James half expected a couple of fish to come flopping out. At first Snape looked utterly baffled, his bony hands flying up to shield his head, as if that would do any good. The students around him backed away quickly, none of them eager to get soaked. But Snape, always the stubborn git, tried to move away from the cloud. Fat chance of that. The cloud just followed him, relentless and insistent, drenching him in buckets of icy rain. "Yes!" Sirius whispered fiercely in Remus's ear, his face lighting up with pure, unfiltered glee. "Bloody yes, Lupin, you beauty!" James couldn't help but laugh along, the sound contagious. There was something incredibly satisfying about seeing Snape, a boy so full of spite that even the Slytherins couldn't always stand him, getting his just desserts. And it wasn't just them enjoying it. James could see a few of the Slytherins trying to hide their grins, though they quickly looked away when Snape caught their eyes. The longer Remus kept his wand trained on Snape, the darker the cloud seemed to get, like it was feeding off his emotions. It was only meant to be a bit of fun, a harmless bit of payback, but as the rain poured down harder, James could feel the mood in the room shift. Snape was starting to sputter now, his eyes squeezed shut against the torrent. His robes were drenched, clinging to him in a way that made him look even more miserable than usual. A puddle was forming around his feet, and James suddenly felt a bit uneasy. Then Lily appeared beside him, her face twisted with worry, reaching out as if to stop him herself. "I know it's you! Stop it now!" James raised his hands in mock surrender, still chuckling, but it was a bit forced now. The last thing he wanted was to make Lily cry over Snivellus of all people. But before he could say anything, Snape made a break for it, trying to bolt out of the way. His robes were so heavy with water, though, that he slipped and crashed to the floor in a soaked heap. James couldn't help the laugh that slipped out, but it wasn't as satisfying as he thought it would be. The rain was coming down so thick now that it was hard to even see Snape through the curtain of water. And the cloud, it was ground somehow, looming larger and darker, rumbling with the threat of lightning. "Stop it, please!" Lily's voice broke, and James could see the tears in her eyes now. That's when he knew it had gone too far. Remus," he muttered, reaching out to touch Remus's arm. "He's had enough, mate." But Snape wasn't getting up. The laughter in the great hall had died down, replaced by a few scattered screams. The tension in the room was thick, pressing in on James's, until he felt like he could hardly breathe. "Finite!" The word rang out through the hall, strong and commanding. The rain stopped immediately, as if someone had flipped a switch. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Dumbledore stood in the entrance, calm and composed, despite the chaos he had just walked into. With a flick of his wand, all the water disappeared, leaving the hall looking as if nothing had happened at all. Nothing, except for Snape, lying there on the floor, sopping wet and utterly humiliated. Remus was shrinking back into his seat, his earlier excitement gone, replaced with a look of guilt and shame. Lily was still crying, and she rushed over to Dumbledore, who was now kneeling by Snape, whispering something too soft for anyone else to hear. James felt a pang of guilt, sharp and unexpected. He hated Snape, sure, but he hadn't meant for it to go this far. He didn't want to actually hurt the bloke, at least not like this. "Everybody to your dormitories, please." Dumbledore's voice was quiet, yet it carried across the hall with ease, leaving no room for argument. "Miss Evans, please fetch Madame Pomfrey." Lily dashed out of the room, and everyone else started to file out in a subdued line. The marauders exchanged glances. Sirius looked irritated, Peter terrified, and Remus just utterly crestfallen. James's mind was racing as they headed back to the Gryffindor Tower, brow furrowed in thought. They'd always prided themselves on their pranks, but this had gone too far. They'd have to be more careful from now on. No more pranks that could actually hurt someone. Even Snape didn't deserve that.